So, what if an AI could do more than just, learn from a textbook? What if it could actually evolve its own intelligence completely from scratch? Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating part of AI that does exactly that. It takes its inspiration from nature to solve problems in a totally different way. Most of the AI we hear about, it kind of learns like a student cramming for a final exam. It's given this huge textbook, a syllabus really, of all the correct inputs and outputs, and it just studies and studies until it can predict the right answer. But what happens when that textbook, that answer key, just doesn't exist? Think about a super complex game. You can't write down every single correct move for every possible situation. It's impossible. All you really know is the final outcome. You either win or you lose. So how in the world do you teach an AI to get better when the only real feedback it gets is at the very, very end? This is the exact challenge that pushes us to think about learning in a new way. To solve a problem like that, we look to the most powerful problem solver out there, evolution itself. And this approach is called neuroevolution. It's a kind of AI that learns not by studying some pre-written guide, but by adapting and surviving, just like life on our planet. So what exactly is neuroevolution? Well, at its heart, it's a method that uses the principles of evolution, like mutation and selection, to build and refine artificial neural networks. The digital brains of an AI. So instead of painstakingly teaching one brain, you create a whole population of them and just let the best ones rise to the top. The easiest way to get your head around this is with that classic phrase, survival of the fittest. But in this case, we're not talking about animals out in the wild. Nope, we're talking about competing algorithms, different AI brains, all trying to solve the exact same problem. The ones that do the best job are the fittest, and they're the ones that get to pass their traits on. And it all works in this constant cycle, this loop. First, you generate a whole population of diverse, sometimes completely random neural networks. Second, you test all of them on a task and give each one a fitness score. Third, you select the top performers, the winners. And finally, and this is the really cool part, you create a brand new generation by copying the winners but with tiny random changes, what we call mutations. You just repeat this loop over and over and over. And with each generation, the population as a whole gets better and better at the task. Okay, but what's really fascinating here is what is actually evolving. Turns out there's not just one way to evolve these digital brains. There are two main strategies for how these networks can change and get smarter over time. So on one hand, you can have a fixed structure for the neural network and only evolve the weights. Think of weights as little dials that control how strong the connections are between neurons. So you're just kind of fine-tuning the existing settings. But on the other hand, there's a much more radical approach, evolving the topology. Here, the actual structure of the brain, the number of neurons, the connections between them, can change from one generation to the next. This whole process is called tuian. It's like letting the AI not just learn, but literally grow a better, more complex brain for whatever job it's doing. So if the AI's brain can actually evolve, how is its design passed down from one generation to the next? Well, this brings us to the idea of a genotype, which is basically the digital DNA that holds all the instructions for building each brain. And just like in nature, there are different ways to write that genetic code. And there are two main ways to do it. The first is called direct encoding, which is like a super detailed blueprint. I mean, every single part of the network, every neuron, every connection is spelled out step by step. But then there's indirect encoding, which is more like a recipe or a set of growth rules. The DNA doesn't describe the final brain. Instead, it describes the process for building it. This allows for these incredibly complex and really elegant solutions to pop up from a very simple set of instructions. And this isn't just some abstract idea. This table here gives you a little peek into the incredible diversity of neuroevolution methods that have been developed over the years. Now, you don't have to read every single line, but just notice the two main camps we were just talking about. You've got methods like NEAT, which uses that direct encoding blueprint approach. And then on the other side, you've got things like HyperNEAT, which uses indirect encoding, that recipe method, to create these amazingly complex patterns. It just goes to show you how rich and varied this field of research is. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, this sounds like a pretty old idea, and, well, you'd be right. So why are we talking about it now? The thing is, after years of being kind of overshadowed by other AI techniques, neuroevolution is making a huge comeback. Yeah, the whole comeback story really kicked into high gear just a few years ago. Researchers at Uber, they made this stunning discovery. They found that these pretty simple evolutionary algorithms could compete with, and in some cases even beat, the gigantic, super complex deep learning models that totally dominate the industry. This was a massive "we told you so" moment for the entire field. So, why was it suddenly so good? Well, it really boils down to two key advantages. First, evolution is just brilliant at exploring. It's way less likely to get stuck on a good enough solution when an even better one might be out there. And second, because it's always experimenting with these random mutations, it can discover some truly wild and creative strategies that a human programmer would probably never even think of. All right, so if this idea is so powerful, what was holding it back for so long? The answer is brutally simple: raw computing power. Neuroevolution was an idea that was just way ahead of its time, waiting for the hardware to finally catch up. The explosion, and I mean absolute explosion, in computing power over the last decade was the secret ingredient that finally unlocked its true potential at a massive scale. Okay, so let's wrap up this explainer. What are the big takeaways? First, neuroevolution is an amazing way for AI to learn when there's no clear right answer for every single step. Second, it can evolve not just the settings of a network, but the actual architecture of its digital brain. And finally, this old idea has found a powerful new life, all because we finally have the massive computing power to let evolution just run wild. And that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to chew on. We started out by programming computers, telling them exactly how to think. Now, we're setting them up to evolve their own ways of thinking. The question is no longer just, what can we solve with AI? It's, what might AI discover how to solve, all on its own?